Welcome to the Holborn Assets channel. In this series, we look at major events in the history of economics that helped to shape the world we live in today. We only cover 3 events a week, so there's plenty of history we can't look at, but if you think we missed a big one, just leave a comment and we'll look into it for a future video. We also welcome any suggestions for any economic or personal finance topics you'd love to know more about. These days, receiving a letter is pretty rare, especially one with an actual stamp attached, rather than some machine franking done in the thousands by a junk mailer. But the postal service is still a vital part of every country's infrastructure. The first adhesive stamp was issued in Britain on the 1st of May 1840. It was called the penny black because, well, it was black and it cost a penny. The idea of a prepaid adhesive stamp had been suggested before, but no one had put it into practice. Around 69 million were printed, and it brought trust and affordability to the postal system. The General Post Office had been established back in 1660, but prices varied and often the receiver would pay rather than the sender. In the US, the postal service can be traced back to 1775, when Benjamin Franklin appointed the first Postmaster General. The US Post is an enormous system, which would be in the top 50 of the Fortune 500 if it were a private business. It also has a 200,000 vehicle fleet, one of the largest in the world. The €110 billion bailout given to Greece by the IMF fund rescued them from defaulting on their debts. It provided financial cover until June 2013, subject to the implementation of austerity measures, structural reforms, and the privatization of national industries. But how did the Greek economy fall into such a condition and require a bailout? The trouble began when Greece joined the Eurozone in 2001. Essentially, this was a monetary union in which Greece was not fit to compete. However, the Greek government began to borrow heavily and cheaply, and then to spend massively on non-growth areas of the economy, such as the military. The European leaders happily lent Greece money over the years, despite the country's reputation for governmental corruption, tax evasion, and the highest debt to GDP level in Europe. When the global financial crisis hit and it became apparent that the Greek government had been somewhat creative with their debt figures, the bubble burst and the country was plunged into a devastating recession. Greece is now rebelling against the austerity measures that the IMF bailout and the Eurozone leaders insist upon, as the economy is yet again on the brink of disastrous debt. The alternative path is for Greece to leave the EU and attempt to go it alone after a dysfunctional 16-year relationship with the Eurozone, but it would be a huge risk. Norway, Denmark and Sweden tied together their currencies in 1873, having been inspired by the Latin monetary union of 1865. Monetary unions were quite the economic fad in the late 19th century Europe, it seems. In order to create the Scandinavian monetary union, each country fixed its currency at a gold par to each other. This provided a tremendous amount of monetary stability between the countries by having a fixed exchange rate. This encouraged trade between the countries and was encouraged by the political idea of a united Scandinavia. Scandinavian leaders hoped that the monetary union would make Scandinavia a global economic power. The theory was solid, and the monetary union ran successfully for 32 years. That was until in 1905, when Swedish King Oscar II renounced his right to the Norwegian throne in the face of growing Norwegian unrest and the threat of a war for independence. Norway declared itself an independent constitutional monarchy, and the monetary union limped on until the outbreak of World War I in 1914, and effectively ended it there. Economic relations between Norway and Sweden have been fascinating ever since, with Norway traditionally the underdog to Sweden. So much so that in the 1970s, Norway offered Sweden a share of future oil revenue in exchange for shares in Swedish Timber and Volvo. At the time, Sweden was not too keen to help their neighbours, and so they snubbed the offer. Fast forward to 2010, and Norway's oil industry was worth $85 billion, and Volvo was sold to Chinese investors for $1.5 billion. The winner takes it all. So, that was the week. Who knows what events from the last few days will end up being recorded in history as important events that changed the world. Don't forget to subscribe so you can learn more about the economic history of the world, as well as see other great videos on managing your money and making investments. See you next time.